Hey folks, Nick here from another BookTube channel, and today I'll be going over my April wrap-up and my May TBR. I had set a goal for myself. I had 6 books on my TBR in April. I managed to read all of them and get an additional book on top of that, as well as a lot of comic book reading and graphic novel reading. So I won't waste too much time and I'll get right into it, starting with some ebooks that I read. Probably the biggest one and the most popular one, The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brandon Sanderson. It's the second of his secret Kickstarter projects, and I did not care for it. It was probably the weakest Sanderson book that I've read to this point overall. Well, prose book, and I'll get to that later. Yeah, I did not really vibe with it at all. I thought it was a little too simplistic and very rough, and it felt like a book that somebody wrote in their spare time that they just decided to release. So I have a full review of that up on the channel if you want to know more. But yeah, that was first book. Another ebook that I read, I just finished this actually, Ghost Eaters by Clay McLeod Chapman, and I liked it. Depending on when this goes up, I may have a review posted of it already, but I did like it. There was some really strong ideas in it. It wasn't always entirely cohesive, that sometimes he let his ideas get away from him a little bit. But overall, really solid book. I got through it pretty quickly, and I did enjoy it. And finally, wrapping up ebooks, I read Night of the Bunny by Derek Heath. This was the extra add-on that wasn't on my TBR. It was Easter weekend, and I wanted something kind of junky to read. This popped up on my feed. He's an indie author that I follow on Instagram, and it was a monster book about a killer Easter bunny. So it was a lot of fun. I have a full review of that up as well. If you're interested, highly recommend checking that out and supporting an independent author. Pretty good time. Kind of read like mature Goosebumps for adults almost. So if that sounds like it's a thing for you, definitely check it out. Okay, physical books. I finished Abaddon's Gate this month, the 3rd book in the Expanse, and I really enjoyed this one. I don't know that I loved it as much as Caliban's War, but that's not saying that this wasn't good. This was excellent. This was a fantastic book. And I really do love the continuation of this series. James S.A. Corey, every installment builds on this universe in some interesting, fun way that's easy to follow. The characters are fun to root for. It's fun science fiction action, but it's also smart, it's clever. I'm having a blast with this series, and I can't wait to read book 4, whatever it's called. What is it? Cibola Burn. So looking forward to that a lot. I also read a nonfiction book this month, something a little different for me. This is Devil's Advocates, Possession by Allison Taylor. This is basically a very long essay about the 1981 horror movie Possession. If that's a movie that you're not familiar with, that's understandable. It was very hard to get a hold of. It wasn't available in the US for a long time, except through back market DVDs. It wasn't streaming anywhere for a while, but recently it was picked up by Shudder, the streaming service there. So if you've never seen the movie, really, really recommend it for this bizarre, nightmarish vision of a crumbling marriage. It's got nothing to do with demonic possession. The name of the movie might make you think that that's what it's about. It's not. It is literally a nightmare vision of a crumbling marriage, and it's fantastic. Features some incredible performances, and it's a challenging movie. It's not. I don't think it's meant to be taken as realistic. It is meant to be taken as like a dream almost. And this essay does its best to explore the themes and ideas from the movie and just give voice to them a little bit. So this is Allison Taylor's interpretation, and it was really enjoyable. So I really enjoy it. Check out the movie, check out the book if you can get a hold of it. Next up, Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. This was the sequel to My Heart is a Chainsaw. I did not really enjoy My Heart is a Chainsaw, but I really enjoyed this book. I've got a full review of it up on the channel, but long story short, everything that didn't work in My Heart is a Chainsaw works here, and everything that did work in My Heart is a Chainsaw works even better here, because it's a more cohesive story. There are things that happen at the end are properly set up in the beginning, unlike the first book. And I really like the progression of the characters here. The Jade Daniels has shown some growth as a character, which is fantastic to see. And we also get to see the point of views of other characters other than Jade, which was really helpful to get outside of her head for a while. So really highly recommend this book. You'll have to get through My Heart is a Chainsaw first, because I don't know that you'll get the full impact if you only read this. But I was very satisfied with this, and I was very, very happy that he made those adjustments. And finally, it is the second Dresden Files book, Full Moon by Jim Butcher. I've got my bookmark in there because I'm not actually done reading it as of this recording. I still got a few days left before the end of the month, and I will be finished with it by the end of the month, or I'll DNF it because I'm really not enjoying it. I thought Stormfront was okay. It was a good diversion, but nothing too special. This really struggling to get interested in it. I'm about a little more than a quarter of the way through, and I'm still just not really in on it. So unless this book seriously turns around and does something great, this will probably be my last Dresden Files book. Okay, now some of the graphic novels and complete comic stories that I read this month. I read Brandon Sanderson's White Sand. I talked about the Frugal Wizard's Awful Handbook before, and how that was the worst Brandon Sanderson prose book that I had read thus far. White Sand is overall the worst Brandon Sanderson thing I've read, period. I did not like it at all. Very rough. It's very clear that he is not a comic writer. I think that the actual scripting in the comic format was done by someone else from Brandon Sanderson's idea, but the idea just didn't seem very well fleshed out. And the artwork, I did not like the artwork at all. I had a lot of fun reviewing this one. I highly, highly recommend that video. If you watch nothing else from this, watch that video so you can see my breakdown of why the art did not work for me. Yeah, I had fun with that. Another comic that I finished, Swamp Thing Green Hell by Jeff Lemire and Doug Mankey. This was a long time coming. The first issue of this came out, I think, 2 years ago, and then it just disappeared. The second issue never came out, and then all of a sudden, a couple months ago, pop, it came back. Issue 2 came out, and then issue 3 came out swiftly after it. It's a 3-issue miniseries. It's a oversized black label format, DC calls it. This was a pretty good Swamp Thing story. Good Swamp Thing story, good John Constantine story as well. Artwork, a little bit hit and miss. I think Doug Mankey is very, very talented, but I didn't love his take on Swamp Thing. I think he wasn't monstrous enough. I don't know, just wasn't creative enough. When I think of all the Swamp Things that I've seen over the years, this one seemed a little too smooth, honestly. Like, he didn't have that kind of growth to him that makes him monstrous. But regardless, Jeff Lemire is a great writer, so this story works really well. So I would recommend that one. Another weird one, a 4-issue miniseries for OMAC. This is a John Byrne book from, I think, the year 2000? May have been earlier. I don't know, but yeah, this is OMAC was a creation of Jack Kirby, and John Byrne did this miniseries as a follow-up with the character. And it's weird because it's a mature reader's one. So like it's a little bit bloody, it's a little bit sexy, and it's written and drawn by John Byrne, who there's no color, it's black and white, and I think he did it on like duo shade paper, which is like what you use if you're making like underground comics or outlaw comics. So just really interesting to see John Byrne doing like a mature outlaw comic for DC Comics. The story was just okay, but the artwork, a lot of fun to explore. So I had a good time with that. And the last one I'll cover is Fantastic Four 1, 2, 3, 4, another 4-issue miniseries by Grant Morrison and Jay Lee. I don't have a ton to say about this one. I think Grant Morrison is a pretty good comic writer. They are hit and miss for me. I sometimes will love something they write, but other times it's just completely like, it just does nothing for me. This one's a bit in the middle. It did not leave too much of an impact on me in terms of a story. Jay Lee's artwork is really good. There's a lot of fun panels in here. So if you're a Fantastic Four fan and you could find this cheap in your dollar bins, like all 4 issues you should be able to find pretty cheap. You know, it's worth picking up, worth a read, but you know, nothing amazing. Okay, so looking forward to May and my TBR for that month. I am once again setting a goal for 6 books because I have accumulated a lot of new books in my collection recently. I don't usually accumulate them at such a high rate. So now I'm left with a lot of stuff that is on my shelf that I have not read, and I really have to get through to some of them. So first thing I'm going to be starting with most likely is Mine by Robert McCammon. I loved Boy's Life. If you watched my review of that, you saw that book absolutely wrecked me. I loved it. This appears to be one of his paperback horror novels. And I'm really excited to get to it just because I loved everything I've read from him so far. So excited to get to this one. I'm also going to be reading a Ray Bradbury book that I've never read before, The Machineries of Joy. It appears to be a short story collection, which is always a lot of fun. Bradbury has some great short stories. So this will be on the TBR for May. A science fiction book, a classic, Have Spacesuit, Will Travel by Robert Heinlein. It's been a while since I've read a Heinlein book. I was really big into him, I would say maybe like seven or 8 years ago. And then I kind of stopped reading him because a lot of what I would try to read stunk, like it was awful. So I cooled off on him, but I got this recently, and it's such a famous title. I figured I want to give this one a shot, so I'm going to check this one out. Also something completely different, Flowers for Algernon. I'm thinking of doing a project for books that I was supposed to read in high school that I either never did or I never really gave them a proper chance, meaning I read them, but I went into them wanting to hate them, so I did. And this is one of those where I didn't read this book, so I want to give it a shot. I found it at a yard sale this past weekend for $1, and I said, all right, this is going to be it. This is going to be the start of this great project. So might be doing a few more classics on the channel coming up, and it's going to be Flowers for Algernon to start. And also, something very similar to Flowers for Algernon, I'm going to be reading Day of the Mummy by Derek Heath. It's the same author that did Night of the Bunny that I talked about earlier. It's another monster book, just about, I assume, a killer mummy. So I'm hoping that'll be a lot of fun. I enjoyed the Bunny book enough, obviously, to pick up his other book. So that should be pretty exciting. So those are going to be the 6 books I aim to read in May. Let's see how that goes. As for comics and graphic novels, I do have a few that I am going to try to read this month. The first is Airtight Garage by Mobius. This is, these comics reprint the complete Airtight Garage story that appeared originally in Heavy Metal magazine that Mobius did. Mobius is an unbelievable comic book artist. If you're not familiar with his work, please check him out. He's got some amazing stuff out there. And this is supposed to be one of his masterpieces. He's got so many. So I'm really excited to get started with this. And the other graphic novel, the only other graphic novel that I'm committing to for next month that I'm very excited about is Do a Powerbomb by Daniel Warren Johnson. I picked up the first issue of this off the stands when it first came out, and it was so much fun. It was so fantastic. The art is just full of energy and life. It's a wrestling comic about a wrestler, I think, like making a deal with the devil and fighting in a supernatural wrestling tournament. So super cool premise. And I'm just really, really stoked to finally get into it. I was waiting for the trade paperback to come out so that I could finally read it all. It's out. I've got it. So this will be definitely being read in May. I'll probably also read some other comics as well, just as the availability arises. But yeah, that is going to be my TBR for the month. Looking forward on the channel. I announced recently I'm also starting a new series. Every Saturday is going to be Swamp Thing Saturday, where I read the next issue in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing run from the 80s. I've already recorded a couple of those videos, and I really like the way they come out. So I really do hope you give those a try, because they're just a lot of fun. Even if you don't like comic books, you might like these videos. They might get you interested in comics, and you can see why I love the medium so much and why I love that series so much. So hope you check that out. I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you all for spending some time with me today. But now it's time to get back to reading.